Okay, let's jump right into this explainer and figure out why that meticulously built memory palace of yours is completely failing you when exam day actually arrives. You know the drill, right? You spend weeks highlighting text, color-coding digital folders, trying to construct these elaborate mental rooms, and you feel so incredibly prepared. But then you sit down, you look at that very first high-stakes question, and boom, the panic sets in. You suddenly realize every single one of those mental rooms is locked tight and completely empty. Now, look at the stark contrast here between these two approaches. Both of these students are staring down the exact same syllabus, preparing for the exact same exam, but their experiences are frankly worlds apart. On one side, we've got the burnt-out crammer. They're stuck in this endless, anxiety-inducing loop of late-night cramming. It's basically like trying to build a fortress on a foundation of sand. Then on the flip side, we have the topper. And it's absolutely crucial to understand this. Their effortless recall, it's not some magic genetic gift. It's a structural advantage. They actually spend way less time studying because they rely exclusively on active systems instead of just brute force. So here's a hard truth for you today. You do not have a bad memory. You just have a passive strategy problem. 90%. Wow, let that number really sink in for a second. That staggering figure represents the failure rate of passive rereading. If you're just sitting there highlighting sentences and repeatedly scanning your textbook, hoping you'll just magically absorb it, well, you're falling victim to what cognitive scientists call the illusion of competence. Because the text is right there in front of you, your brain kind of tricks you into thinking, oh yeah, I know this. But in reality, your mental filing system is treating all that hard work exactly like junk mail. It literally discards it the second you close the book. All right, before we replace this broken system with the samurai retrieval hack, we need a solid baseline. So do me a favor and drop your current average grade in the comments below. Honestly, whether it's an A, a C, or even an F, just own it. Let's make a pact right now. This is your starting line, and we are going to actively track your undeniable glow up together as you put this new system into practice. So, here's the agenda for our explainer today. Think of this as your official training manual to master this system. We're going to cover the passive study trap, the empty cup mindset, the blank sheet method, creating visual anchors, the 5X writing rule, and finally, the sensei teach back. Let's kick things off with section 1, the passive study trap. We need to stop building on sand and look at exactly why cramming just leaves you trapped in a vicious cycle of burnout. The absolute most crucial point to grasp here is that your brain is not a sponge. I know, we're taught differently, but it's true. Most students get stuck in this passive mode, just assuming they can sort of passively soak up information over time. But doing that, it's like trying to hold water in a broken bucket. It just leaks right out. Instead, you need to think of your brain as a muscle, or your memory like a samurai sword. In neuroscience, the process we're trying to trigger is called desirable difficulty. Your brain literally needs that friction. Every single time you fail to remember a fact and then force yourself to actively pull it from your memory, you are heavily myelinating that neural pathway. It's exactly like sharpening a sword through repeated, deliberate strikes. Your recall gets faster and sharper precisely because of the intentional struggle of active recall. Moving right along to section 2, the empty cup mindset. Preparing the mind. Let's look at the philosophical groundwork you need to lay before you even think about picking up a pen. There's this famous Zen Buddhist proverb that says you cannot pour tea into a cup that is already full. So how on earth does that apply to studying? Well, think about it. Most students study just to prove, either to themselves or to everyone else, just how smart they are. And that fills their mental cup with ego and this deep, paralyzing fear of failure. When your entire self-worth is tied to instantly knowing the answer, the cognitive load just becomes way too heavy. That immense pressure is literally the exact trigger for procrastination and eventually total burnout. To fight back against this, you have to consciously shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Try adopting this exact mantra. I don't need to know everything. I'm here to discover what I don't know yet. Seriously, say it out loud before you start your next session. Adopting this mindset empties your cup. It radically relieves all that immense pressure from passive studying, and it completely preps your mind for some real growth and discovery. All right, on to section 3, the blank sheet method. The first strike. Now that our minds are completely clear, it's time to step into the dojo and ditch that awful 10% retention rate once and for all. Okay, this is basically active recall on steroids. Here's how it works. Step 1, completely close your book. Step 2, grab a totally blank sheet of paper. Step 3, write down absolutely everything you can remember about the topic without looking. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, it is going to feel incredibly frustrating at first. Your brain is going to actively resist it. You'll stare at that blank page and feel this intense, almost unbearable urge to just peek at the textbook, just for a tiny hint. Do not give in. That specific uncomfortable frustration, that feeling of violently digging through your mental archives, that is the exact magic that's forging a permanent memory in your brain.
Which brings us to section 4, creating visual anchors, forging the memory. So you've got your brain dumped blank sheet in front of you, and you're naturally going to notice some massive gaps. How do we fix those?
We use something called grid recall to create visual anchors. Here's the thing. Your brain is physically wired to remember images way, way better than just abstract text. So feed it what it loves. Instead of repeating that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell for the 100th time, literally draw a tiny cell factory with actual sparks flying out of its engines. And hey, this works beautifully for advanced complex topics too. Studying law? Don't just stare at a boring legal precedent. Turn it into a vivid scene. Draw a tiny judge's gavel smashing a unique, specific object related to that ruling. By taking those dry facts and weaving them directly into your visual cortex, you are making the information 10 times stickier, which makes it radically easier to retrieve when you're under exam pressure. Next up is section 5, the 5X writing rule, building the neural network. Let's see exactly how elite students structure their repetition to make sure they never fall back into that passive reading trap. You see, top students don't just write a fact down once and lazily move on. No way. They use a technique rooted in what psychologists call elaborative rehearsal. By rewriting a single fact in these 5 distinct ways, you radically change how your brain processes the data. Let's walk through it. First, you write out the basic definition just to get the raw facts down. Then, force your brain to translate that exact definition into a spatial diagram. Third, weave that data into a narrative story. Give it a beginning, a middle, and an end. Fourth, create a metaphorical bridge that links it to something you already understand. And finally, number 5, write it out as if you're explaining it to a friend. When you do this, you aren't just memorizing anymore. You are building a dense, totally impenetrable neural web around that one single concept.
And finally, we've arrived at section 6, the Sensei Teach Back, achieving mastery. This is it, the ultimate technique that guarantees you have truly mastered the material.
At the very end of your study session, I want you to try explaining the absolute hardest concept out loud. Talk to a blank wall, talk to your notebook, whatever. Just do it exactly as if you are teaching a 10-year-old. This is heavily based on the famous Feynman technique. See, when you're teaching a kid, you can't hide behind complex jargon, vague ideas, or academic buzzwords. You are forced to distill the information down to its absolute simplest moving parts. If you stumble, if you hesitate, or if you catch yourself using a word a 10-year-old wouldn't immediately grasp, well, you've just instantly exposed a weak point in your own memory. Basically, if you can't explain it simply, you just don't understand it well enough yet. Listen, you really don't need to be a genius to succeed. You just need a system that genuinely respects how your brain actually works. It's time to stop wasting 80% of your time on passive habits that just leak right out of your head. So, do it right now. Drop a comment telling me your biggest study struggle. Commit to starting the Samurai Retrieval Hack tonight. Empty that cup of yours and become truly unstoppable. And I'll leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. If you completely ditched rereading tomorrow, what impossible subject could you finally conquer?